Hey guys, and welcome to the next episode of the ROTJ build guide. So today we are working on the gun portion. So this is the first step in building the head. You can see the parts that we've got laid out here. You're going to need both front barrels and the back barrels. So you can see those sitting on this napkin right here. And then these are the plastic pieces that you're going to need. And then you've got a pin right here with a small hexagon little nut piece that is welded onto the back. One thing to note, be very careful of this nut. Do not grab and try to twist this bar, as this nut is just welded on the top and it could pop off. If it does pop off, just use a little bit of super glue and put it back on and you should be okay, because this is going to get glued onto here. All of this is not mobile, so it is not a piece that actually has to move. So just a note. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab this little gun barrel piece. If we flip this upside down, you can see some grooves. And we're going to go ahead and glue that in place into these grooves. So we're just going to stick some glue into these larger channels and press that in place. Very simple. So once that is in place, the little bit of fiddliness that we have is installing this, these two sides, and this all together. So this is positioned where this part faces the back of the RTJ. This faces the front. This is the top. And this is the back. This is the front. Oop. This is the bottom. This is the top. This little square piece that you can see right here is going to fit just in front of this little bar. So if you can see right here, I'm putting that right there. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this loosely, and then we're going to have to move directly to gluing these two pieces together. But first, we're going to have to glue or drill through this piece. So this is our drill bit. I believe it is a 3/32 size. If you want to double check and use metric, you can use metric to measure the size of your bar. And the goal here is to make it just barely large enough to press this through, because if you make it too loose, then your gun's going to be kind of floppy. So we're erring on the side of make a little bit tighter fit. There we go. All right, so that took about less than 5 minutes. We're just kind of sanding back and forth, and now our pin drops right through. Now this is a little bit less friction than technically you need, but there are steps to this locking mechanism here. You can see right here we've got little holes on both sides, and this is what allows you to position the gun. So you don't need a whole lot of friction here. So this is going to work just fine. Okay, back to the actual assembly phase. Let's go ahead, grab some glue here. We're going to put a drop of glue here. We're going to put this in position right here. We're going to set that down. Now let's go ahead, put some glue on these guys. These pieces face forward. And then while everything is still a little bit wet, we're going to lock it into position. Glue it halfway through here so that there's a gap on either side. So you can see that the balls are sitting on the inside, but they're just barely touching the sides. And you're gonna have to be very careful when you do that on this side because the glue can go through and actually touch your plastic. If this happens, then you're gonna have to sit there and work this back and forth and just keep it from binding. But that's gonna be the goal, is to make sure that these little balls that touch the interior of this outer frame, that they are making contact but just barely. Then you're gonna glue underneath this nut to keep it from moving. Now, what ended up happening for me was a little bit of glue passed through when I filled this reservoir. It passed through, reached into the axle, and then I sat for about 5 or 6 minutes just doing this, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I ended up grabbing a piece of needle nose pliers and holding onto this just to make sure that the axle was not moving. And what that did to me was created the friction, because the glue had gone into the hole here. And now this is completely friction filled. There's not really any bubble stepping, so it doesn't do this, but it stays in position wherever I want it to be. So that turned out to be a happy accident. You can force that to happen just by letting a little bit of glue flow. Again, don't let a lot of glue flow, but a little bit of glue, and then it's going to give you exactly what you want, because the glue creates that friction against the axle. But you can't stop moving this until the glue dries, because if the glue dries, then your pole is now going to be permanently attached to the inside, which is exactly what you do not want, okay? So just be aware of that. Now, let's move on. The last two parts are the gun barrels. For the left side, the gun barrel has a square tip to it. For the right side, the gun barrel has a circle tip to it. So just be aware of that. When you insert the gun barrel into its back part, you're going to see that you've got this little tiny indentation, and then the rest of it is free. So when you glue it, just glue this back part, and then you're going to have to hold it and stare at it for a little while, and you're going to float that so that there's a gap all the way around. It's a very tiny gap, but that just adds to the realism of the gun barrel, because it's going to sit there and float all the way around. And that's part of the mechanism of the armature. Now, if you wanted to, you could leave this free so that you could do extra positioning for the stop motion, because this is the way it was designed. Was they had it sitting like this, and then they could position it out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in. I'm going to go ahead and glue mine so that it just sits there like that. If you wanted it to have friction, you could put a drop of glue and then just do this over and over again, and then it's going to have friction. So whatever you want to do. Okay, to be able to glue these parts in, all I'm doing is holding this in position. I'm just sitting it like this. I'm putting some glue into the top part, and then just running glue down the side. Then the circle one, remember, goes on the right-hand side. Make sure that you don't overfill. If you do, grab a paintbrush, suck it up. And then I'm looking at this from the top just to make sure that I am nice and straight. And then I'm going to look at it from the side and make sure that it's nice and level. It looks like it just barely sticks up past the central plastic piece. So it's going to take a minute for the glue to dry. So I'm going to get this in the right angle, and then I'm going to spray it. So I'm going to hold it with one hand, or attempt to hold it with one hand. So I'm just using my index finger on the right hand to support it. So we want to make sure these guys are very even. Okay. There you go. Perfect. So it'll take a little while for the glue to continue to harden. Make sure that this is still not completely solidifying. So check that every once in a while, and just make sure, set this down just like this. Continue to check it, and just make sure that your gun barrels are nice and perfect. Okay, in this section, we're going to put together the side gun for the head of the ROTJ. So as you can see here, we've got all of the parts that go to the gun, and then you would also have this section, which we can use for test fitting, but we're not actually going to install the gun into this test section. So these are the pieces that you're going to need. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with this back section here. This is the orientation that you're going to be working from. So this is the front. The angle points towards the head, just like this. Okay? So this is at the very bottom. Everything else points towards the head, just like that. So just remember to stay in that orientation. So we're going to apply some glue to this guy. And this is going to pop onto the back just like this. And this supports our big gun slash missile slash laser, whatever you want to call it. So that's step number one. Step number two, I'm going to use a 1.8 millimeter drill bit, and I'm going to open up this bottom hole just a little bit. That's for this gun right here. There is a T shape on the gun. I know this is going to be hard for you to see. Try to hold it here. So there's a T shape on this part here. That T, this part, bottom of the T faces downwards. And we want that to sit flush. So it looks like 1.8 is too small. So let's switch to a 2. See if I have a 1.9. I don't think I do. 1.9 is probably the golden number, but we'll switch to a 2. Steel doesn't want to go in. There we go. Shit. Okay, so I used a number 2. And then what I did was I kind of walled it out a little bit back and forth, and that creates a very tight fit for this guy to go in. So be gentle. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the back. We don't need much because it's such a tight fit. And again, we're looking for, remember, this is our orientation. The T faces down. And then we're just going to press this in place. Just like that. So that's our first metal piece in place. Now let's go ahead and grab this guy. That's going to go in the big hole towards the top. So we're going to put some glue around the outside edge. And that fits in place really simply. There you go. Now we can grab this beautiful barrel. This one goes in this middle hole up here. This one is a slightly loose fit, so you're going to have to hold it. So I'm being a little bit liberal with my glue. I'm going to drop a little bit off on a piece of paper so it doesn't squirt out everywhere. So again, be gentle. Everything's still completely solidifying. So now we've got this little tiny piece here. This is the pin that's going to hold it all together to the body. So let's go ahead, drop a little bit of glue in here. And I'm pressing with a decent amount of pressure, just ensuring that it's nice and straight. So they chopped this one off. This was not a kit part that we designed. So I'm not exactly sure why they removed it, but we will deal with it. So that's that. And then last but not least, we have our shield. And that goes in here. Now, for painting purposes, I don't want to install the shield permanently, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to put a tiny drop. So I put a drop and then tapped it on my napkin. That way I can pull this off again. So we'll paint this shield separately. And there you go. Absolutely beautiful. It's interesting how they all kind of face towards each other a little bit. So if you think about it, they would all converge on a central point when it's all said and done. That's very neat. There's that slight angle to everything. Very neat. So beautiful gun. And then that just slots in here. This is a loose fit, so we can create a friction fit with this with some super glue so that you don't have to actually glue that in. So we'll show you how to do that when the time is right. But you've already seen that done a lot on some of the other things. So we'll set that up. But beautiful gun. And that is the last of the accessory parts. So in the next episode, we will do the head, and then we'll be ready to actually start installing everything on the base.